Hey guys, welcome to my first video of 2019. In this video I'll explain to you why I stopped watching the news, my reasons, and 3 of the benefits that I've personally seen. I've seen a whole bunch more, but I'm going to go over the top 3. Unfortunately, what a lot of people don't understand is the news is not designed to keep you informed as most people believe it to be. It's designed to control you, to feed you information that keeps you thinking a certain way, having certain opinions, and ultimately keeping you obedient. As well as for me, it kept me feeling terrible just all the time, being bombarded with images and hearing about these horrific stories of children being killed, children being kidnapped, car accidents, people dying, bombings, various different governments going over to other countries and bombing villages of innocent people, just constantly bombarding you with negative, horrific news that keeps you believing that those other people are the enemy. They keep you divided. It's always the them and us mentality. We are doing something to them, or they did something to us. Now I understand that doesn't apply to everyone, and I'm not saying it does, but even if it doesn't apply to you, or you don't believe that it applies to you, I genuinely encourage you to really think about why you watch the news, what benefits you feel you gain from watching it, how much time you spend watching it, discussing it, and just thinking about it. For me, I spent a huge amount of time thinking about it, and it made me feel absolutely terrible. As I said earlier, there are a ton of benefits that I got from when I stopped watching the news back in 2011, but for me, I'm just going to cover the top 3. It was the top 3 that really kind of stood out above the rest. Number 1, you feel better. As I said, watching the news used to make me feel absolutely terrible. In part, I know I'm pretty sensitive to negativity, so that definitely exaggerated things for me personally. But just think about the average news broadcast. You sit there for an hour just being bombarded with the worst of the worst stories from around the world. From murders, bombings, rape, adultery, the worst of the politics, and any other crap that they can scrape from the bottom of the barrel. So now imagine replacing that with something positive, something you personally find uplifting and enjoyable. For me, I replaced it with reading and audiobooks for the most part. There were some other things that factored in as well, but pretty much everything that I replaced that time, that hour or 2 hours, however long it may have been, that I spent watching the news each day, whether it was in the morning, whilst you're eating your breakfast, driving into work, sitting there having your dinner in the evening, whenever it is that you fit in your news, take that same exact amount of time and imagine replacing it with something that genuinely makes you feel good. Now, as I say, it made me feel better pretty much immediately. But there's 2 aspects to this. The first one is you're immediately just replacing something negative with something positive. But there's no real long-term reward for if you sit and watch the news for an hour and you know everybody that's been bombed in the world and everybody that's been killed and all the bad stuff that's going on. Next week, next month, next year, there's no benefit from you having watched that then. But if you're doing personal development of some type and you're growing yourself, whether it's emotional development, you're learning a new skill, you're growing a business, maybe starting a business, whatever it is, that time that you switch out also becomes a lot more productive as well. So the other thing to consider with this as well is there's also long-term benefits to it as well. Number 2, you'll open your mind. The second benefit is over time you will definitely open your mind. Now, I certainly don't condone murder, violence, bombings, etc. of anyone to anyone else. But one thing I noticed when I stopped having the propaganda shoved down my throat every single day was an even better ability to see things from other people's perspectives. To really open your mind and give up the them and us divide that the news does so well, whether it's something as unimportant as sports right through to the welfare of other human beings, regardless of where they're from, their religion, their race, their skin colour, whatever it is that's constantly being shoved down our throats as a means of divide. Now, of course there are bad people in the world and they're scattered all over the world, but when you realise they make up a very, very small minority, it makes you realise the majority are just like you and me. Number 3, health benefits. Now, a quick disclaimer, I'm not a doctor and this is based on my own personal experiences, but feel free to do some research on what I'm about to say if you prefer to hear it from a real medical professional. For me personally, I noticed a ton of benefits, almost overnight in some cases. One of the more serious issues with constantly being bombarded with negativity is you think about negative things and in turn you feel those negative feelings. And the problem with feeling feelings of anger, hate, resentment and all of those negative feelings that you feel as a result of watching the news and hearing those horrific stories and being turned against those people is when you feel those feelings, it acidifies your body. It literally makes your body too acidic, and once it does that, it opens up the perfect environment for your body to get sick and disease to start spreading. Take for example cancer. It cannot survive in an alkaline environment, but it absolutely thrives in an acidic environment. Not only can you start to feel physically better, but most definitely you can feel mentally and emotionally better too. I find in the daytime now I feel lighter and just much more clear-headed. Not only am I not thinking about some awful thing I saw on the news, but I'm also thinking about what I choose to think about. Your mind no longer wanders off to some catastrophe where it makes you feel terrible and ultimately useless. You don't feel like you can do anything to change what you're seeing anyway. But you'll find that you're thinking about far more positive and uplifting things as well, especially, as I said earlier, if you're starting a new business or reading a new book, you're doing something that is positive, has a positive impact on you. So when your mind then starts wandering and you start thinking about something just generally, it tends to then wander off to those new, more positive things. And for me, this most definitely applies to nighttime and much better sleep too. I used to watch the news, see some story where some small child had been killed or some village of innocent people had been killed, bombed, whatever it may have been. Then literally lay in bed at night trying to sleep, playing those images that I had just seen on the TV over and over in my head. And it just made me feel terrible. There's nothing that I can do to change that some village had been bombed by a government or something, but I couldn't get the images out my head of the dead people laying around and the fear and helplessness that those people had. I was always going back to feeling so bad about those things that I had seen and heard. And no surprise, the result was that I ended up feeling crap. I would lay awake, not being able to sleep for hours at a time, thinking about things that were making me feel bad, then eventually get off to sleep and have some messed up dream about something or other. I could honestly list off at least another 20 benefits that I personally experienced from doing this. But don't take my word for it, try it for yourself. Even if you don't believe a word I'm saying, give it a try. Just 2 weeks, don't watch any news and replace it with something positive. It doesn't matter what it is. If you don't like reading, then start watching some documentaries or just replace the time that you would have spent watching the news, just replace it with something. Maybe going out with friends, speaking to people on the phone, whatever it is, it really doesn't matter. All you're doing is you're replacing that time slot, or maybe multiple time slots throughout the day. You're replacing that time with something positive. And if you do decide to give this a try, or particularly if this is something that you've also done as well, if you gave up the news in the past and you've got something that you want to share, let me know down in the comments, because I always read all my comments anyway. But I also think that this is something good to try and to get out to other people. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that are thinking, watching the news, it's not that bad, or it doesn't make me feel bad. So if this is something that you've done yourself as well, please share it down in the comments, because it genuinely will help people. And of course, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and that notification bell to get notified on all my future videos as well. Thanks a lot. See you in the next one.